May 26, 1941. Lake Pontchartrain, Louisiana. Commander Ross Daggett from the Navy Bureau of Ships and Major Ernest Linsert from the Marine Corps Equipment Board stand on a wooden dock, watches synchronized, stopwatches ready. Behind them, 3 prototype landing craft bob in the water. Each one looks identical from the outside. Plywood hulls, 36 feet long, painted navy grey. But the bows are different. Hinged steel ramps where conventional boats have solid walls. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Andrew Higgins, a 45-year-old boat builder with a reputation for profanity and bourbon, waves his arm. The first boat's engine roars to life. A grey marine diesel, 225 horsepower. 36 Higgins Industries employees crowd into the hull, simulating a combat-loaded infantry platoon. Full packs, rifles, helmets. The boat surges forward, cutting through the lake at 12 knots. It beaches hard on the muddy shore. The steel ramp drops, a metallic clang. The men pour out in 8 seconds, every single one. The boat reverses immediately, propeller protected in its recessed tunnel, and backs into deep water without fouling. Daggett clicks his stopwatch. He looks at Linsert. 8 seconds. The previous design, the landing craft personnel large, required men to climb over the sides. That took 3 minutes on average. Sometimes longer under combat conditions. 3 minutes of vulnerability. 3 minutes of exposure to machine gun fire, mortar rounds, artillery. 3 minutes for an entire platoon to become casualties before they even reach the fight. This moment at Lake Pontchartrain represents the culmination of a problem the United States Marine Corps has been trying to solve since the First World War. How do you put infantry ashore on a defended beach? Not through a port. Ports have docks, cranes, concrete piers that can handle heavy equipment. But ports are also fortified, defended, mined, and blocked. The Germans learned that lesson at Dunkirk. The British learned it at Dieppe. Any enemy with half a brain fortifies their ports because that's where invasions have to happen. Except they don't. Not anymore. Not if you can build a boat that solves an impossible problem. How do you create a landing craft light enough to be mass-produced quickly, shallow enough to run right up onto a beach, sturdy enough to survive surf and enemy fire, fast enough to make multiple runs between ships and shore, and capable of unloading troops in seconds instead of minutes? Every previous attempt failed for different reasons. The British had landing craft that were too heavy, required cranes to launch, and couldn't extract themselves from beaches. The Navy's Bureau of Construction and Repair kept designing boats that looked good on paper and failed in practice. Deep drafts that grounded on sandbars, exposed propellers that shattered on rocks, high sides that made unloading slow and dangerous. The Marine Corps in 1938 is desperate. They know amphibious warfare is coming. They know island-hopping campaigns in the Pacific will require putting thousands of men ashore on hostile beaches. They know the Navy doesn't have a solution, so they start looking elsewhere. They find Andrew Jackson Higgins in New Orleans. In 1938, Higgins operates a single boatyard behind his showroom on St. Charles Avenue. 75 employees, most of them building workboats for oil companies and trappers. Shallow draft craft designed to navigate Louisiana's bayous and marshes. Boats that can run through 18 inches of water without damaging their propellers. Boats that can ram right up onto a muddy bank at full speed and back off without getting stuck. The military isn't interested in Higgins at first. He's not part of the established naval shipbuilding industry. He doesn't have connections in Washington. He doesn't have contracts with the big yards in New York or Philadelphia. What he has is a boat called the Eureka. Designed in 1926 for hauling lumber through swamps, it has a hull shape nobody's ever seen before. A deep V forward, transitioning to a reverse curve amidships, then 2 flat planning surfaces aft. In the center, a semi-tunnel that protects the propeller. A spoonbill bow that curls up at the front, forcing water underneath instead of over the top. The Eureka can do things other boats can't. It runs over logs without damage. It beaches at full speed and extracts itself immediately. It turns almost within its own length, and it operates in water so shallow that conventional boats would be high and dry. Higgins has been trying to sell these boats to the military since 1934. The Navy isn't interested. The Army Corps of Engineers buys a few in 1936. The Coast Guard orders some. But the Navy's Bureau of Ships keeps insisting they can design better boats in-house. They can't. In February 1939, the Marine Corps finally convinces the Navy to test Higgins' boats in fleet landing exercises. The Eureka, modified slightly for military use and designated Landing Craft Personnel Large, or LCPL, outperforms every Navy-designed boat in every category. Speed, maneuverability, reliability, shallow draft capability. The Marines are impressed. The Navy is not. They put the LCPL into limited production, but they don't love it. The problem is obvious to anyone who watches troops unload. Men have to climb over the sides. That means going one at a time, carefully, while weighed down with 60 pounds of combat gear. In calm water during an exercise, it takes about 3 minutes to get 36 men out of the boat. In heavy surf during combat, it could take 5 minutes, or longer. 3 to 5 minutes. Standing packed together in a wooden boat with plywood, sides that won't stop rifle bullets. 3 to 5 minutes while machine guns sweep the waterline. 3 to 5 minutes for mortars to find the range. Every Marine in the Corps knows this is a death trap. They know it intellectually. They'll learn it experientially at Tarawa and Peleliu and Iwo Jima, where men will climb over the sides of boats and die in the water before they reach the beach. But in April 1941, the solution already exists. The Japanese have been using it since 1937. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, Marine Corps observers at the Battle of Shanghai watched Japanese forces land troops using Daihatsu-class landing craft. These boats have bow ramps, steel ramps that drop down, allowing men to charge straight out the front. First Lieutenant Victor Krulak, a Marine observer, takes photographs. He brings them back to the States. He shows them to anyone who'll look. In April 1941, Krulak meets Andrew Higgins at Marine Corps Base Quantico. He shows Higgins the photographs of Japanese landing craft. Higgins stares at the picture for maybe 10 seconds. Then he gets on the phone to his chief engineer in New Orleans. He describes the Japanese design. He tells the engineer to build a mock-up immediately. He'll inspect it when he gets back to Louisiana. Higgins doesn't wait for Navy approval. He doesn't submit a proposal through official channels. He doesn't request funding. He builds 3 prototypes at his own expense, takes him 1 month. The boats are modified LCPL hulls with one critical change. The solid bow has been cut away and replaced with a full-width steel ramp. The ramp is hinged at the bottom. When lowered, it forms a bridge between the boat and the beach. When raised, it provides frontal protection for the troops packed inside. The engineering is straightforward. The challenge isn't the ramp mechanism itself. It's integrating the ramp without compromising the boat's structural integrity or seaworthiness. Higgins' team solves it in 30 days. They reinforce the bow structure with additional framing. They add a locking mechanism to secure the ramp during transit. They waterproof the ramp hinge. They test it on Lake Pontchartrain. The ramp works. It lowers in 2 seconds. It doesn't buckle under the weight of men charging across it. It doesn't leak when raised. It doesn't jam from sand or debris. On May 26, 1941, Commander Daggett and Major Linsert arrive in New Orleans to inspect the prototypes. They expect to see drawings, maybe a wooden model. Instead, Higgins takes them to Lake Pontchartrain and shows them 3 fully functional boats. The demonstration is conclusive. The ramp bow design doesn't just work, it transforms the entire concept of amphibious assault. Troops unload in 8 seconds. The boat can carry a jeep and drive it straight onto the beach. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Supplies can be rolled out on carts instead of manhandled over the sides. And critically, the boat can make multiple runs. Beach, unload, reverse, return to the transport ship, reload, and do it again. The entire cycle takes 3 to 4 minutes. The Navy awards Higgins a contract for 50 boats. The design is designated Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel, LCVP. Within 18 months, it will become the most produced landing craft in history. Over 23,000 LCVPs will be built by Higgins Industries and licensed manufacturers. They'll be used in every major amphibious operation of the war: North Africa, Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, Normandy, southern France, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Guam, Peleliu, Leyte, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and the Rhine River crossing in Germany. But in May 1941, nobody knows any of that yet. Daggett and Linsert just know they found a boat that works. The specifications of the final LCVP design are deceptively simple: 36 feet 3 inches long, 10 feet 10 inches wide, 3 feet draft aft, 2 feet 2 inches forward, 18,000 pounds empty, powered by a Grey Marine 671 diesel engine producing 225 horsepower, maximum speed 12 knots, crew of 4, coxswain, engineer, bowman, and sternman. Capacity 36 combat-equipped infantrymen, or a jeep and 12 troops, or 8,100 pounds of cargo. The hull is constructed from marine plywood, 3/4-inch panels on the sides and rear. The bottom is reinforced with heavier planking over wooden ribs. The entire structure is held together with thousands of bronze screws and waterproof glue. Total construction time per boat, once production is optimized, about 90 hours. The plywood construction is controversial. Plywood won't stop bullets. It won't stop shrapnel. It offers almost no protection to the men inside. But plywood is light. Light means the boat draws less water, carries more payload, achieves higher speed with the same engine. Light means it can be mass-produced quickly by manufacturers who don't have steelworking capabilities. Light means it can be handled by standard ship davits and cranes. The steel comes in exactly 3 places: the bow ramp, the 2 machine gun mounts, and a steel skid plate on the keel that protects the bottom during beaching. Everything else is wood. The spoonbill bow, inherited from the original Eureka design, forces water down and under the hull during the final approach to the beach. This creates a cushion of aerated water that reduces friction and allows the boat to slide farther up onto the sand. When the coxswain reverses the engine, that same bow design helps lift the stern, reducing the draft even further and making it easier to back off the beach. The semi-tunnel that protects the propeller is equally critical. Conventional boats have exposed propellers that extend below the keel. Hit a rock or a sandbar at speed and the propeller shatters. The engine torque tears the shaft from its bearings. The boat is disabled. Higgins' semi-tunnel positions the propeller slightly recessed into the hull. A heavy wooden keel extends below it, absorbing impacts. The boat can run hard, aground, reverse, and back off without damage. These design elements didn't emerge from advanced engineering theory. They came from practical experience, building workboats for Louisiana oil drillers and trappers in the 1920s and 30s. Higgins built boats that had to operate in conditions that would destroy conventional craft: shallow water with submerged roots and logs, mud banks that could trap a boat, strong currents and waves in Lake Pontchartrain and the Gulf of Mexico. He solved those problems through trial and error. Build a boat, test it, break it, figure out what broke, fix it, test it again. By 1926, he had a design that worked: the Eureka. The transition from civilian workboat to military landing craft required surprisingly few modifications. Strengthen the hull structure to carry heavier loads, add the bow ramp, install machine gun mounts at the bow for 230 caliber Brownings, reinforce the deck to support vehicle weight, standardize the engine. Everything else stayed essentially the same. This meant Higgins could move from prototype to production almost immediately. He didn't need to develop new manufacturing techniques or train workers in exotic processes. His existing workforce already knew how to build Eureka boats. The LCVP was just an Eureka with a ramp. In June 1941, Higgins Industries receives the contract for 50 LCVPs. By December, When Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, production is already ramping up. The Navy places orders for hundreds more, then thousands. By mid-1942, Higgins Industries is producing boats faster than the Navy can take delivery. The single boatyard that employed 75 workers in 1938 has become 7 plants employing over 25,000 people by late 1943. The expansion is almost unimaginable. Higgins acquires industrial space all over New Orleans, City Park Avenue, the Industrial Canal, Michoud, Bayou St. John. He builds assembly lines using techniques borrowed from automobile manufacturing, prefabricated sections, standardized parts, moving assembly. Workers specialize in specific tasks. One team cuts plywood panels, another team assembles frames, another team installs engines, another team does final fitting and waterproofing. The boats move down the line, gaining components at each station. At peak production, Higgins Industries produces over 700 boats per month. That's more than 20 boats per day. The plants operate 24 hours a day, 3 shifts. Higgins himself routinely works 16-hour days. He walks the production lines, inspecting work, solving problems, pushing foremen to maintain quality while increasing speed. His workforce is unprecedented for 1940s New Orleans. Fully integrated, white workers and black workers, men and women, elderly workers and disabled workers. Everyone paid equal wages for equal work. This isn't idealism, it's pragmatism. Higgins needs workers. The young men are all in uniform. He takes whoever can do the job. The workforce responds. Production records fall constantly. Quality remains high. Defect rates stay low. Workers know the boats they're building will carry American troops into combat. They know lives depend on their work. That knowledge drives a level of commitment and precision that surprises even Higgins. His employees take ownership of the product. They spot problems and fix them on the line. They suggest improvements. They work overtime without complaint when production schedules demand it. The logistics of building boats this fast creates its own challenges. Higgins Industries consumes enormous quantities of marine plywood, bronze screws, waterproof glue, and diesel engines. The plywood comes primarily from the Philippines until Japan conquers the Pleiades Islands. After that, it comes from domestic sources. Higgins buys the entire Philippine mahogany harvest for 1939 and stores it, anticipating war. When domestic plywood production can't keep pace, Higgins finds alternative suppliers. He negotiates directly with lumber companies. He arranges shipping priorities. He maintains stockpiles. The engines are a similar challenge. Gray Marine Motor Company in Detroit modifies General Motors' 671 diesel engines for marine use. The engines need to be reliable, powerful, and simple enough for minimally trained crews to maintain. Gray Marine produces thousands of them, but even that isn't enough. Higgins also uses Hall-Scott gasoline engines rated at 250 horsepower as alternatives when diesels aren't available. The bronze screws, waterproof glue, and other components all have to arrive on schedule. Any disruption in the supply chain slows production. Higgins addresses this by maintaining relationships with dozens of suppliers, qualifying multiple sources for each critical component, and accepting some variation in specifications to keep the boats moving. A screw from one manufacturer might be slightly different from a screw from another manufacturer, but both work. Good enough is good enough when the alternative is stopping the line. Transportation creates another bottleneck. The boats are built in New Orleans, but they're needed in San Diego, San Francisco, Norfolk, New York, and eventually overseas bases. Higgins can't sail them there. It would take too long and expose the boats to weather damage. Instead, he ships them by rail. The boats are loaded onto flat cars and transported to ports. To save time, they're painted while on the train. Workers at rail yards apply the paint schemes as the flat cars move through. Navy grey for Pacific operations. Different camouflage patterns for European operations. By mid-1943, Higgins boats are arriving at embarkation points faster than the military can distribute them. Hundreds of LCVPs sit in storage at bases around the country and overseas, waiting for assignment to transport ships. This is not a bad problem to have. Better to have too many boats than too few. Better to have spares when boats are damaged or destroyed in combat. The Marines and Army know this. They've learned that amphibious assault is attrition warfare. You lose boats, engines fail, hulls are holed by obstacles, ramps jam from sand and combat damage, machine guns are knocked out, coxswains are killed or wounded. The mathematics are brutal. Plan on losing 10 to 15% of your boats in the initial waves. The first combat test of the LCVP comes in August 1942. Operation Watchtower. The invasion of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. 1st Marine Division, 19,000 men, landing across multiple beaches on an island the Japanese have been fortifying for months. The Higgins boats work exactly as designed. They run right up onto the coral beaches. Ramps drop. Marines charge out in seconds. The boats reverse and return for another load, wave after wave. The speed of the unloading catches the Japanese off guard. They expect the Americans to need hours to establish a beachhead. Instead, the Marines are inland and securing the airfield within 2 hours. Not everything goes perfectly. Some boats hit coral reefs and hole their hulls. Some engines fail in the heat and humidity. Some ramps jam from sand and coral debris. But the majority of the boats perform well. More importantly, the concept proves itself. Put enough boats in the water, accept that some will be lost, and you can put an entire division ashore in a morning. The Japanese don't have an effective counter. Their beach defences are designed to stop a slow, methodical landing over hours or days. They're not prepared for the overwhelming speed and volume that the Higgins boats enable. 3 months later, November 1942. Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa. American and British forces landing at Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers. Thousands of Higgins boats, some carrying troops, some carrying supplies, some carrying light vehicles. The North African beaches are different from the Pacific. Sandy instead of coral, gradual slopes instead of steep drop-offs. The Higgins boats adapt. They beach farther up the sand, sometimes 40 or 50 feet from the waterline. The troops disembark onto dry sand instead of wading through surf. The French forces defending the beaches put up sporadic resistance. Some beaches are contested. Machine gun fire rakes the boats. Men are killed in the hulls and on the ramps, but the majority of the landings succeed. The speed of the assault and the sheer number of boats overwhelm defensive positions. Within 24 hours, Allied forces control all 3 landing areas. The Higgins boats have enabled the first major American ground offensive against Axis forces, July 1943. Operation Husky. The invasion of Sicily. The largest amphibious operation attempted to that point. Over 160,000 troops, British, American, and Canadian forces, landing on 45 miles of coastline. Higgins boats by the thousands. The Mediterranean in summer is calmer than the Atlantic in winter, but it's still challenging. Waves 4 to 5 feet high, strong currents, rocky beaches in some areas. The boats handle it. The critical advantage isn't just the ramp, it's the shallow draft. Higgins boats can operate in 3 feet of water. That means they can beach in places where conventional landing craft can't get close. They can avoid deeper water obstacles. They can maneuver around submerged rocks. The Sicily landings are messy but successful. Some boats are lost to mines. Some are sunk by coastal artillery. Some capsize in heavy surf. But the majority make it. By nightfall on the first day, Allied forces have established secure beachheads across the entire landing zone. German and Italian counterattacks fail because the Allies can reinforce faster than the defenders can respond. The Higgins boats keep running, supply runs, reinforcement runs, casualty evacuation. By the end of the first week, over 150,000 tons of supplies have been landed across open beaches. No ports required. September 1943. Operation Avalanche. The invasion of Salerno, Italy. German forces are ready this time. They've studied Allied amphibious tactics. They've fortified the beaches with mines, obstacles, and interlocking fields of fire. The Higgins boats come in under direct fire. Machine guns, mortars, 88mm anti-tank guns firing over open sights. Boats are hit, ramps are blown off, hulls are holed. Men die before they reach the beach, but the assault succeeds because there are too many boats to stop them all. The Germans can't kill every boat. They can't stop every wave. The mathematics of volume overcome the mathematics of firepower. By June 6, 1944, the LCVP has been refined through 2 years of combat experience. Minor improvements, reinforced bow structures, better waterproofing on electrical systems, modified engine mounts that reduce vibration, updated machine gun mounts, but the basic design hasn't changed. It doesn't need to. The concept works. D-Day. Operation Overlord. The invasion of Normandy. 5 landing beaches. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, Sword. Over 150,000 troops in the first 24 hours. Higgins boats are everywhere. Thousands of them. Running from transport ships to the beaches and back. Again and again. The first LCVPs hit Utah Beach at 6:28 in the morning. 4th Infantry Division. The boats beach in good order. Ramps drop. Men charge out into waist-deep water. German resistance on Utah is lighter than expected. The troops move inland. The boats reverse and return for another load. At Omaha Beach, it's different. The Germans have concentrated forces there. Multiple bunkers with overlapping fields of fire. Mortars pre-registered on the beach. Machine guns sighted to sweep the waterline. The Higgins boats come in under murderous fire. Some boats are hit before they beach. Ramps are shot away. Engines are disabled. Coxswains are killed. Men trying to exit the boats are cut down by machine gun fire. Bodies pile up on the ramps. Wounded men drown in the surf. Some boats manage to unload and reverse. Others are disabled and left stranded. The casualties at Omaha are horrific. Over 2,000 American casualties on the first day, many of them before they even reached dry land. But even at Omaha, the Higgins boats do their job. They keep coming, wave after wave. Enough boats get through that the beachhead is established. By nightfall, American forces control the high ground above the beach. The German defenders are falling back. The Higgins boats are still running. At the British and Canadian beaches, Gold, Juneau, and Sword, the story is similar. Heavy resistance in some sectors, lighter in others, boats are lost. Men are killed. But the assault succeeds. By the end of D-Day, over 150,000 Allied troops are ashore in France. The Higgins boats made that possible. Without them, there is no invasion. Without them, the Allies would have been forced to assault a heavily fortified port. The casualties would have been catastrophic. The invasion might have failed entirely. General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, understood this completely. Years later, he would say, "Andrew Higgins is the man who won the war for us. If Higgins had not designed and built those LCVPs, we never could have landed over an open beach. The whole strategy of the war would have been different. This isn't hyperbole. It's strategic analysis." The entire Allied strategy in Europe and the Pacific depended on the ability to land forces on hostile beaches. That capability came from the Higgins boat. No other piece of equipment, no other weapon system, enabled as much operational flexibility as the LCVP. The Pacific War demonstrates this even more clearly. Island hopping requires amphibious assault. You can't advance across the Pacific without taking islands. You can't take islands without landing troops. You can't land troops without landing craft. The Japanese understand this. They fortify every island they hold. They build bunkers, dig tunnels, site artillery to cover the beaches. They plan to make every landing so costly that the Americans will eventually give up. The strategy fails because the Higgins boat makes American casualties acceptable. Not low. Acceptable. The Marines can land enough troops fast enough that they overwhelm Japanese defenses before the defenders can react effectively. Tarawa, in November 1943, becomes the test case. Japanese forces have turned the island into a fortress. Thousands of troops, hundreds of fortified positions. The beaches are ringed with obstacles and mines. The Marines land in Higgins boats and Amtraks, amphibious tractors. The initial waves take horrific casualties, but follow-on waves keep coming. The Japanese can't kill everyone. By the end of the third day, the island is secure. American casualties are over 3,000. Japanese casualties are over 4,000. The entire garrison is wiped out except for 17 prisoners. The fighting is savage. But the island is taken. The lesson from Tarawa is clear. You can take any island if you're willing to pay the price. The Higgins boat ensures the price stays within acceptable limits. You lose boats, you lose men. But you win. Peleliu, in September 1944. 1st Marine Division lands across 3 beaches. Japanese defenders are dug into caves and fortified positions in the central ridges. The landing itself succeeds. The Higgins boats deliver the Marines ashore in the first hour. Then the Marines fight for 2 months to clear the island. Over 10,000 American casualties, over 10,000 Japanese casualties. But the landing itself works exactly as planned. Iwo Jima, in February 1945. The most iconic amphibious assault in Marine Corps history. 3 Marine divisions landing across 2 miles of volcanic sand beaches. Japanese forces have built the most sophisticated defensive system in the Pacific. Tunnels, caves, interconnected positions. Artillery sighted to cover every inch of beach. The first waves of Higgins boats hit the beach, and the Japanese open fire. The Marines take enormous casualties, but they keep coming, wave after wave. The Higgins boats deliver over 30,000 Marines ashore in the first 6 hours. The fighting lasts 36 days. Over 26,000 American casualties. Over 21,000 Japanese casualties. But the landing succeeds. The island is taken. The Higgins boats did their job. Okinawa in April 1945. The last major amphibious operation of the Pacific War. 183,000 troops landing across 8 beaches. Japanese resistance on the beaches is lighter than expected. The Japanese have pulled back into defensive positions inland, but the landing itself is the largest amphibious operation in the Pacific. Higgins boats deliver the entire invasion force ashore in less than 8 hours. The island campaign lasts 82 days. Over 50,000 American casualties. Over 100,000 Japanese casualties. But the landing works. The Higgins boats work. The numbers tell the story. Over 23,000 LCVPs built. Over 20,000 by Higgins Industries alone. The rest by licensed manufacturers. Used in every major amphibious operation. North Africa, Sicily, Italy, southern France, Normandy, Pacific Islands, and the Rhine crossing into Germany in March 1945. The boats landed more Allied troops during World War II than all other types of landing craft, combined. The LCVP became the standard, the baseline against which all other landing craft were measured. But the story isn't just about numbers, it's about what those numbers enabled. Strategic flexibility. The ability to land anywhere, anytime, without needing a port. The ability to concentrate overwhelming force at a point of your choosing. The ability to bypass heavily defended positions and land behind them. The ability to sustain operations across open beaches for weeks or months. The British learned this at Sicily and Italy. They used Higgins boats for commando raids on the French coast in 1943 and 44. Fast insertions, quick extractions. The Germans couldn't predict where the British would strike next. The Japanese learned it too late. They fortified their ports and major beaches, but the Americans landed wherever they wanted. The Higgins boats gave them that freedom. You can't defend everywhere. You can't fortify every beach. The Japanese tried. They spread their forces thin, trying to cover hundreds of miles of coastline. The Americans concentrated overwhelming force at a single point, broke through, and the Japanese couldn't respond fast enough. The pattern repeated at every island. The Japanese knew it was coming. They couldn't stop it. German commanders on the Atlantic Wall faced the same problem. They knew the Allies would invade France. They didn't know where. Calais seemed most likely. Shortest crossing from England, best port facilities. The Germans concentrated forces there. But the Allies landed at Normandy. Longer crossing, no major ports. but 5 beaches suitable for landing craft. The Germans had forces at Normandy, but not enough. The Higgins boats delivered troops faster than the Germans could bring in reinforcements. Within a week, over 300,000 Allied troops were ashore. Within a month, over 1 million. The Atlantic Wall was broken. All of this traced back to that demonstration at Lake Pontchartrain in May 1941. 8 seconds to unload 36 men instead of 3 minutes. That 164-second difference multiplied across thousands of boats and millions of troops. Time is the critical variable in amphibious assault. Get ashore fast, you survive. Get ashore slow, you die. The Higgins boat made the difference between fast and slow, between survival and death, between success and failure, between winning and losing. Andrew Jackson Higgins himself never saw most of the operations his boats enabled. He stayed in New Orleans, running his plants, pushing production, solving problems. He worked 16-hour days throughout the war. He fought with Navy bureaucrats who wanted to micromanage his production methods. He fought with union organizers who wanted to slow down his assembly lines. He fought with suppliers who couldn't deliver on time. He never stopped building boats. By the time Japan surrendered in August 1945, Higgins Industries had delivered over 20,000 boats to the military, an average of over 13 boats per day for 4 years straight. The end of the war was the end of Higgins Industries. Government contracts were cancelled immediately. The military didn't need more boats. Higgins tried to convert to civilian production, pleasure boats, commercial fishing vessels, small cargo craft. But the market wasn't there. The economy was transitioning from war to peace. Nobody wanted boats. His workforce shrank from 25,000 to a few hundred. Union disputes intensified. Strikes shut down production. Higgins sold off most of his plants. By 1950, Higgins Industries was a shadow of what it had been. Andrew Higgins died in New Orleans on August 1, 1952. He was 65 years old. His funeral was attended by military officers who understood what his boats had accomplished, but the general public had largely forgotten. The Higgins boat had been overshadowed by more glamorous weapons. Fighters and bombers got more attention. Tanks and artillery were more photogenic. The landing craft that enabled the entire Allied strategy in Europe and the Pacific faded into obscurity. For decades, military historians wrote about D-Day and the Pacific Island campaigns without mentioning the boats. Or they mentioned them in passing, a footnote to the larger story of strategy and tactics. It wasn't until the 1990s, during a resurgence of interest in World War II history, that the Higgins boat finally received recognition. Books like Jerry Strahan's Andrew Jackson Higgins and The Boats That Won World War II brought attention to Higgins' contributions. Films like Saving Private Ryan showed the reality of landing under fire from a Higgins boat. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans, established in part because of Higgins' contribution, displays a restored LCVP and educates visitors about its importance. In 2019, Andrew Higgins was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, finally receiving recognition as an inventor and entrepreneur whose work changed the course of history. Today, fewer than 20 original LCVPs are known to still exist. Most were scrapped after the war. The plywood hulls rotted, the engines were salvaged, the steel components were recycled. A few survived in private collections or were acquired by museums. Those that remain are carefully preserved, restored to operational condition when possible, displayed to remind people of what they represented. The Higgins boat demonstrates several enduring principles. First, that simple solutions often outperform complex ones. The LCVP succeeded because it was fundamentally simple. Plywood hull, diesel engine, steel ramp, nothing exotic, nothing that required advanced manufacturing capabilities. Any competent boatyard could build them. This simplicity enabled mass production. It enabled rapid deployment. It enabled field repairs. Complexity would have killed the program. Second, that incremental improvement through practical experience beats theoretical design. The Higgins boat evolved from workboats built for Louisiana swamps. Every design element had been tested in real-world conditions. The the spoonbill bow, the recessed propeller tunnel, the shallow draft. These features weren't developed in a laboratory. They were developed through trial and error on Lake Pontchartrain and in the bayous. When the military needed landing craft, Higgins already had a proven design. He just added a ramp. Third, that manufacturing capacity matters as much as engineering excellence. The Higgins boat wasn't the technically best landing craft design possible, but it was good enough, and it could be produced in massive quantities quickly. Good enough in volume beats perfect in scarcity. The Allies won in part because they could build more boats faster than the Axis could destroy them. Higgins' assembly line techniques, borrowed from automobile manufacturing, made that possible. Fourth, that operational flexibility has strategic value. The Higgins boat gave Allied commanders options. They could land anywhere. They didn't need ports. They didn't need specialized infrastructure, just a beach with a gentle enough slope. This forced Axis commanders to defend everywhere, which meant they were strong nowhere. Strategic flexibility translated into tactical advantage at every landing site. Finally, that individual innovation can change the course of history. Andrew Higgins was one man running a small boatyard in New Orleans. He didn't have the resources of major shipbuilders. He didn't have government connections. What he had was a good design and the determination to prove it worked. That was enough. His boats enabled the Allied victory in World War II. Eisenhower said it. Military historians confirm it. Without the Higgins boat, the entire Allied strategy would have been different, possibly impossible. The story of the Higgins boat is, ultimately, about solving impossible problems through disciplined creativity and relentless execution. The problem seemed unsolvable. Land troops on defended beaches without ports, without heavy casualties, without specialized equipment that takes years to develop. The solution required abandoning assumptions about how landing craft should work. It required borrowing ideas from workboats designed for completely different purposes. It required accepting that the perfect design wasn't achievable in the time available, so good enough would have to do. And it required manufacturing at a scale that most people thought impossible. The demonstration at Lake Pontchartrain in May 1941 showed it could be done. 8 seconds instead of 3 minutes. 36 men charging down a ramp instead of climbing over the sides one at a time. That difference, multiplied across thousands of boats and millions of troops, changed World War II. It enabled victories that would have been impossible otherwise. It saved lives that would have been lost in slower landings. It proved that sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. And it showed that one person with a good idea and the determination to see it through can change the world. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.